Enjoy the bubbles, sweetie.
Are you serious right now?
I can't believe she actually did it.
One bottle of champagne, one moment of arrogance, and $2.4 billion evaporated in less than 60 seconds. When Madison Whitmore decided to humiliate a black woman at her brother's engagement party, she had no idea she was pouring champagne over the head of Naomi Carter, CEO of Carter Technologies, the most powerful tech merger broker in North America. The room laughed, the cameras flashed, and Madison smiled, believing she was untouchable. But what happened next didn't just ruin her family's empire. It exposed a truth that powerful people spend millions trying to hide. That racism isn't just morally wrong, it's financially catastrophic. This is the story of how one racist act cost a billionaire family everything.
Naomi Carter didn't look like what most people expected when they heard the words tech CEO. At 34 years old, she stood 5'6" in her favorite cream-colored heels, wore her natural hair in elegant locks that fell past her shoulders, and had a smile that could disarm the most hostile boardroom. But behind that smile was a mind that had brokered over $15 billion in technology acquisitions before she turned 35. She'd built Carter Technologies from her studio apartment 12 years ago with nothing but a laptop, a business degree from Howard University, and an unshakable belief that black excellence wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Now, her firm didn't just facilitate deals, it controlled them. When Fortune 500 companies wanted to acquire startups, when tech giants needed to merge divisions, when billion-dollar contracts hung in the balance, they called Naomi Carter. Her reputation was spotless, her network was global, and her influence was the kind of power that couldn't be bought, only earned. Tonight, she was attending the engagement party of Marcus Whitmore, heir to Whitmore Industries, a manufacturing and logistics empire worth $8.7 billion. The Whitmores wanted to expand into tech logistics, and Naomi's firm was the key to making it happen. Marcus had been courting her professional services for 6 months, and tonight was supposed to be a celebration of both his engagement and the preliminary partnership discussions they'd been having. The Whitmore estate was exactly what you'd expect. Sprawling gardens, crystal chandeliers, champagne towers that seemed to touch the ceiling, and guests dripping in wealth and privilege. Naomi had been to dozens of events like this. She knew how to navigate these spaces, how to be gracious, professional, and confident without making insecure people feel threatened. She'd arrived alone, by choice. She didn't need a +1 to validate her presence. She was there as a businesswoman, a potential partner, and someone who'd earned her seat at every table she'd ever sat at. The evening started pleasantly enough. Marcus introduced her to several family members and business associates. Conversations flowed about market trends, acquisition strategies, and the future of automated logistics. Naomi was in her element, sharp, articulate, and commanding respect without demanding it. But she noticed something in the eyes of certain guests, a lingering stare, a forced smile. The way conversations seemed to pause when she approached, then resumed with slightly lower voices. She'd felt this energy before, the subtle discomfort some people experienced when a black woman walked into spaces they believed belonged only to them. Naomi had learned long ago not to internalize it. She couldn't control other people's prejudices, only her own excellence. So she continued to network, continued to smile, continued to be the brilliant professional she'd always been. Then she met Madison Whitmore. Marcus's younger sister was everything Naomi had been warned about in whispered conversations with other black professionals who dealt with the Whitmore family. Madison was 28, had never worked a day in her life, and treated her family's wealth like a personality trait. She wore a designer green dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that comes not from achievement, but from never being told no. Their introduction was brief. Madison's eyes had scanned Naomi from head to toe with barely concealed disdain, her handshake limp and dismissive. "Oh," Madison had said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You're the tech person Marcus has been talking about. How interesting." The word interesting landed like an insult wrapped in silk. Naomi had simply smiled and moved on. She dealt with Madison Whitmore's before. She knew that engaging with that kind of energy was pointless. Better to focus on the actual business at hand and let her work speak for itself. But what Naomi didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Madison Whitmore was about to make the biggest mistake of her family's life. And the entire party was about to witness it.
The shift happened around 9 p.m., when the champagne had been flowing for hours and inhibitions had started to dissolve. Naomi was standing near the edge of the main ballroom, having a thoughtful conversation with an investor from Singapore about emerging markets in Southeast Asia. She was engaged, focused, doing exactly what she'd come here to do: build relationships and explore opportunities. That's when she heard the laughter. It started as a ripple of giggles from a group near the Champagne Tower. Madison and 4 of her friends, all dressed in designer everything, all holding crystal flutes, all looking directly at Naomi with expressions that made her stomach tighten. She tried to ignore it, tried to refocus on her conversation, but the laughter grew louder, more pointed, more deliberate. Then Madison's voice cut through the ambient noise of the party like a blade. "Oh my God, you guys, look at her hair. Is that even real?" The investor Naomi had been speaking with suddenly found his phone incredibly interesting. He mumbled an excuse and drifted away, leaving Naomi standing alone as Madison's group approached. Naomi turned to face them, her expression neutral, but her mind already calculating. She'd been here before, not in this exact situation, but in countless variations of it. The microaggressions, the innocent questions about her hair, her background, her qualifications. The way white women, especially white wealthy women, seem to feel entitled to interrogate and diminish black women in spaces they deemed their own. "It's real," Naomi said calmly. "Is there something I can help you with?" Madison took a long sip of champagne, her eyes glittering with something ugly. "I'm just curious," she said, her voice syrupy and false. "Did you do it yourself, or did you have to go to some special place?" Her friends giggled. Other guests were starting to notice now, conversations pausing, heads turning. Naomi felt the familiar heat rising in her chest, the anger she'd learned to control, to channel, to never let them see. "My hair is professionally maintained, just like yours, I imagine." "Oh, I wouldn't know," Madison said with exaggerated innocence. "I've never had to deal with that kind of hair." The emphasis on that was deliberate, cruel, designed to other, to diminish, to remind Naomi that in Madison's world, she didn't belong. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Most continued to watch in silence, their inaction a form of complicity. Naomi could have walked away, should have walked away, but something in Madison's smirk, something in the entitlement radiating from her like expensive perfume, made her stand her ground. "Madison," Naomi said calmly, "I'm here as your brother's potential business partner. I'd appreciate if we could keep this evening professional." "Professional," Madison laughed, and it was a sound like breaking glass. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just here trying to social climb your way into my family's money." The words hung in the air like poison. Naomi felt every eye in the vicinity locked on her. This was the test. This was always the test. How would the black woman react? Would she get angry and prove their stereotypes right? Or would she shrink and confirm their belief that she didn't belong? "I don't need your family's money," Naomi said, steady as steel. "I have my own." It was the truth, and it clearly wasn't what Madison wanted to hear. Her smile faltered for just a moment before hardening into something vicious. How much could you possibly have? Madison sneered. Let me guess, you got into some diversity program at a tech company, worked your way up, and now you think you're somebody? Madison, that's enough. Marcus had appeared, his face flushed with embarrassment and alcohol. You're being rude. I'm being honest. Someone has to say what everyone's thinking. She doesn't belong here, Marcus. Look at her. Look at this party. Does she look like she fits in? The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of it, the discomfort, the complicity, the way people who might have privately disagreed with Madison's words were nonetheless willing to let them stand unchallenged. This was the insidious nature of racism in wealthy spaces. It wasn't always violent. It wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just allowed. I'm going to leave, Naomi said quietly, with as much dignity as she could gather. Marcus, we can discuss our business arrangement another time. She turned to walk away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her head held high, even as humiliation burned through her veins. She almost made it. But Madison Whitmore wasn't done. Wait, Madison called out, her voice sing-song and mocking. You can't leave yet. We haven't even toasted to my brother's engagement. She heard the footsteps behind her but didn't turn around in time. The champagne was ice cold when it hit her. Madison had grabbed a full bottle from a passing server and poured it directly over Naomi's head, drenching her hair, her dress, her shoulders, the liquid cascading down her face and staining the white fabric she wore. The room erupted. Some people gasped, some laughed, actually laughed as if this was entertainment, as if the humiliation of a black woman was something funny, something deserved, something acceptable. Madison stood there with the empty bottle in her hand, her face glowing with satisfaction, her friends filming on their phones. Oops, Madison said with mock innocence. I guess you really don't belong here. Naomi stood frozen, champagne dripping from her locks, her dress ruined, her dignity shattered in front of 100 people who had collectively decided that her humiliation was either amusing or not worth intervening to stop. This was the moment that would define everything that came next. Because what Madison Whitmore didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 3 major tech companies were waiting on Naomi Carter's recommendation for a $2.4 billion merger that would have made Whitmore Industries the dominant tech player in tech logistics. What Madison didn't know was that the diversity hire she just publicly humiliated was the single most influential merger broker in North American tech, with the power to make or break billion-dollar deals with a single phone call. What Madison didn't know was that Naomi Carter didn't get to where she was by being weak. She got there by being strategic, by being brilliant, and by understanding that in a world designed to underestimate black excellence, the greatest revenge wasn't violence. It was success. Naomi Carter reached up slowly and wiped champagne from her eyes. She looked at Madison, then at Marcus, then at the sea of faces that had watched her degradation and done nothing. And then she smiled. Not a warm smile, not a friendly smile. A smile that promised consequences. Thank you for the evening, Naomi said softly. It's been enlightening. She walked out of the Whitmore estate with her head high, champagne-soaked and trembling with rage, but unbroken. Behind her, the party slowly resumed, guests whispering and laughing, Madison basking in her cruelty, Marcus drowning his embarrassment in another drink. None of them realized that their entire future had just walked out the door, and none of them realized that Naomi Carter's phone was already ringing.
Naomi didn't cry in the car. She sat in the back of her driver's town car, champagne-soaked dress clinging to her skin, and she didn't cry.
She'd learned long ago that tears were a luxury she couldn't afford, not when the world was watching, waiting for her to break, hoping to confirm every stereotype they'd ever believed about black women being too emotional or not professional enough. Instead, she pulled out her phone. The screen lit up with notifications, texts from colleagues who'd heard what happened, emails from business partners, and 3 missed calls from David Chen, CEO of Teknova, the company currently in final negotiations for the $2.4 billion acquisition that would have positioned Whitmore Industries as a key player in the deal. Naomi called him back. "David," she said, her voice unnaturally calm, "we need to talk about the Whitmore partnership." "I heard what happened," David said immediately, his voice tight with anger. "Naomi, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she lied, "but I need you to understand something. Whitmore Industries can no longer be part of this acquisition." There was a pause. "Naomi, I'm not asking, David. I'm telling you. If Whitmore Industries is involved in any capacity, Carter Technologies will not broker this deal. And without my firm facilitating the merger, this entire acquisition falls apart. You know that, I know that. And you need to decide right now whose values align with the future you want to build." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with calculation. Teknova needed this merger, but they needed Naomi Carter more. Her reputation, her connections, her ability to navigate the complex regulatory and financial landscapes of multi-billion-dollar deals, she was irreplaceable. "Give me 2 hours," David finally said. "I'll handle it." 1 hour, Naomi corrected. "And David, I want it public. I want everyone to know exactly why Whitmore Industries was removed from this deal." She hung up. Then she called the next CEO, and the next, and the next. By the time Naomi arrived home and had showered the champagne out of her hair, 5 major tech companies had issued statements withdrawing their partnerships with Whitmore Industries. By midnight, the industry press had picked up the story, and the image of Madison pouring champagne over Naomi's head, filmed by Madison's own friends, had gone viral. But it wasn't just about the image. It was about what Naomi did next. She didn't write an angry social media post. She didn't give a tearful interview. Instead, she wrote a calm, measured statement that was shared across every major business platform. "Tonight, I experienced the kind of racial discrimination that many black professionals face in predominantly white spaces. What happened to me at the Whitmore estate wasn't just personally humiliating, it was a reflection of values that have no place in modern business. Carter Technologies has built its reputation on integrity, respect, and the belief that excellence has no color. We will no longer work with companies or individuals who do not share these values. Effective immediately, all partnerships between Carter Technologies and Whitmore Industries have been terminated." The statement was professional, powerful, undeniable. And it hit the Whitmore family like a financial nuclear bomb. Because Naomi Carter wasn't just any business partner, she was the business partner. The one Marcus had spent 6 months courting. The one whose connections could have transformed their logistics empire into a tech powerhouse. The one whose single endorsement could open doors that all the Whitmore money in the world couldn't buy. And now she was gone, and she'd taken billions of dollars in opportunity with her. By 3 a.m., Marcus Whitmore's phone was exploding with calls from panicked board members and investors. The $2.4 billion Teknova deal had officially collapsed, with Teknova's CEO publicly stating that Whitmore Industries' values are incompatible with our company culture. Other companies followed. Partnerships dissolved. Contracts were quietly terminated.
The business world, which had been willing to overlook a lot of problematic behavior in the name of profit, suddenly couldn't afford to be associated with the family whose daughter had gone viral for committing a racist act of cruelty. Because in 2025, racism wasn't just morally wrong, it was bad business. And Madison Whitmore, in her champagne-soaked moment of cruelty, had just proven that the cost of racism wasn't abstract or theoretical. It was $2.4 billion, and counting. At her home, Naomi Carter sat in her living room, her locks wrapped in a silk scarf, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel satisfied. She felt tired. Tired of having to prove her humanity. Tired of navigating spaces designed to make her feel small. Tired of the mental calculations she had to perform every time she entered a room full of people who looked nothing like her. But she also felt something else. Power. The power of knowing that this time, for once, there would be consequences.
The fallout was swift and merciless. Within 48 hours, Whitmore Industries' stock had dropped 23%. Within a week, 2 major investors had pulled their backing. Marcus Whitmore's engagement was quietly called off as his fiancée's family distanced themselves from the scandal. And Madison Whitmore, the woman who'd poured champagne over a black CEO's head for entertainment, had become the face of everything wrong with entitled racist privilege. She issued an apology, of course, they always do. It was written by lawyers and posted on Instagram with comments turned off. "I deeply regret my actions and the pain I caused. I am committed to learning and growing from this experience." The words were empty, performative, the kind of non-apology that takes no real accountability and expects forgiveness without change. Naomi didn't respond to it. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. But the story didn't end with Madison's fall from grace or the Whitmore family's financial devastation. It continued in ways both public and private, rippling outward like waves from a stone thrown into still water. 3 black women in tech reached out to Naomi privately to share their own stories of discrimination. Incidents they'd stayed silent about because they feared professional retaliation, because they didn't think anyone would believe them, because they'd been told their entire lives that speaking up would make things worse, not better. Naomi listened to each of them, and then she helped them. Introductions were made, opportunities were created, networks were expanded. Because if her humiliation could be transformed into something meaningful, it would be this: the amplification of other black voices, the creation of pathways for people who'd been told there was no room for them at the table. A month after the incident, Naomi was invited to speak at a tech industry conference about diversity, inclusion, and the real cost of racism in corporate spaces. She almost declined. She didn't want to become the racism spokesperson. She didn't want her career defined by what Madison Whitmore had done to her. But then she thought about all the young black professionals watching, wondering if they should keep fighting or just give up. So, she accepted. Her speech was 17 minutes long and didn't mention Madison Whitmore by name even once. Instead, she talked about systemic barriers, about the tax black excellence pays just to exist in white spaces, about the exhaustion of constantly having to prove your humanity before you can prove your competence. And she ended with this: "What happened to me wasn't unique. It was just filmed. Every day, black professionals, black women especially, navigate spaces where our presence is questioned, our expertise doubted, our dignity treated as optional. And we're told to stay silent, to be grateful, to not make waves. But here's what I learned. Your discomfort with racism will never be greater than my exhaustion from experiencing it. So if my story makes you uncomfortable, good. Sit with that discomfort. Because for us, it's not a moment. It's a lifetime. The audience was silent when she finished. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the entire room erupted in a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. That speech was watched 4.7 million times online. It was shared by activists, educators, and young professionals of all backgrounds who were tired of pretending that racism was a thing of the past, tired of being told to be patient, tired of waiting for spaces to be made for them instead of taking the space they'd earned. As for Madison Whitmore, she eventually deleted all her social media accounts and moved to Europe. Some tabloids claimed she was finding herself. Others said she was hiding from the consequences of her actions. Either way, she was gone, and the world moved on. But Naomi Carter didn't just move on. She evolved. She expanded Carter Technologies to include a mentorship program specifically for Black women in tech. She used her platform to highlight systemic racism in hiring and investment practices. She became not just a successful CEO, but a symbol of something bigger. Proof that Black excellence doesn't just survive in hostile spaces, it transforms them. Because the truth is this: racism isn't just about individual acts of cruelty. It's about systems, structures, and cultures that allow those acts to happen without consequence. It's about the 100 people at that party who watched Naomi get humiliated and did nothing. It's about the investors who only divested when it became financially inconvenient to stay. It's about a society that will tolerate racism right up until the moment it affects the bottom line. But it's also about this: resistance, resilience, the refusal to shrink, the power of Black women who've been told their entire lives that they're too much or not enough, and who choose excellence anyway. Madison Whitmore thought she was pouring champagne on a woman who didn't belong. She was actually pouring champagne on the woman who would cost her family everything. And that's not justice. Not really. But it's a start.